Hello, welcome to a new edition of the Right Wing Populist podcast. I am the Right Wing Populist. So today I wanted to do another podcast segment talking about Kyle Kulinski. My last podcast, sort of discussing all my gripes with him. The secular talk fans have definitely made their displeasure known with me. Just look at the comments. Some of them are very funny, and I wanted to address a few of them. I also wanted to talk. I didn't know this at the time that the day I released my podcast talking about Kyle and his YouTube channel, I didn't know that he was having Cenk Uygur on his show with Krystal, Kyle, and Friends. So I also want to talk about that a little bit. And then, for those who don't know, on Saturdays, I have a new segment at the top, and then the rest of the podcast are the different podcasts throughout the week. That's why this is, going to be over an hour. So that's how our Saturday podcast works. So I just want to address a couple of the criticisms I saw in the comments from yesterday's podcast on YouTube. Number one, some said I didn't use enough citations, and I think that's actually a fair critique. I sort of was just kind of ranting, and I wasn't as detailed as I should have been. I accept that criticism. And there were certain things I just took for granted that people would know about. Like when I referenced Kyle for being anti-democratic, I referenced a Supreme Court ruling about Trump being on the ballot. I didn't, specify it. And I want to do that now. The case I was referring to was Trump v. Anderson. And the case evolved around the 14th Amendment, Section 3. And the 14th Amendment, Section 3, that refers to the insurrection clause that says you cannot hold public office if you've engaged in insurrection. And there were left-wing legal groups and interest groups who, after Trump announced he was running for president again after the 2022 midterms, a bunch of these left-wing groups sued to keep Trump off the primary ballots. And in Colorado, there was one of these left-wing groups were successful at the state Supreme Court in Colorado. And the Colorado Supreme Court ruled that Trump couldn't be on the Colorado primary ballot. Trump's legal team then appealed that to the U.S. Supreme Court, and then the U.S. Supreme Court ruled unanimously, including the 3 liberal justices. They said that states are not able to take federal candidates off of state ballots, and that only Congress can enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment for federal offices. That was the ruling. And I just wanted to make that clear because I saw that was a common critique that I didn't give enough citations. The other thing, people talking about his election predictions, look, I'm not going to break down his whole YouTube channel. He has the video, as far as I know, is still on his channel. His base prediction was Kamala Harris would get 319 electoral votes. He said worst case scenario, Harris would get 276. That's public record. I don't need to reference that. Just look at his YouTube video. It's still up, I believe. I'm sorry, that was a terrible prediction. I was right about that. Almost everything I said about him, whether you like him or not, was accurate. Okay? Maybe I didn't put as much detail as I should have. That's fair. But I'm sorry, guys. You're a little bit in denial if you think that Kyle Kulinski hasn't become more partisan over these last, really, 10 years. It's been a process. But certainly he's much more partisan than he was during Trump's first term. You have to acknowledge that. Just look at the 2024 election. He was like sucking Kamala Harris off the whole election cycle. He didn't do that to Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton. And Kamala Harris wasn't like a Bernie Sanders type Democrat. She was still a corporate Democrat, but he was sucking her off the whole time because he's just become more partisan. I can understand that. But some of you secular talk fans are a little bit in denial. Why do you think his election prediction was so off base? Because he's become so partisan that he's lost touch with your basic Americans, the average American. So I understand some of the criticism. There are other criticisms. I mean, most of the comments were just funny, and I appreciate that. And look, I am an amateur content maker. I'm not saying this content's amazing yet. So to those type of criticisms, I understand those criticisms, to be fair. I'm trying, and maybe it'll never work out, but I'm enjoying it, so I'm going to keep doing it. And the views have not been bad. In all fair, for 3 weeks, if you look at the amount of views I've gotten on YouTube and all the other podcast platforms, I've actually done pretty well, all things considered, but I'll stop acting defensive now. And the other thing I wanted to, again, talk about is he had Cenk on his show that he does with his wife, Crystal Ball of Breaking Points, co-host with Sagar and Jetty. And after the 2024 election, but before Trump was inaugurated, so I think in December, Cenk was going around trying to get, support for certain positions where MAGA and the progressives have some overlap, such as being anti-war, being anti-corporate in certain instances, trying to cut the Pentagon. And, Cenk and Krystal kind of had a back and forth back in December over it. And so yesterday's episode was sort of, I guess, sort of like a review or like a checkup about, where their two predictions sort of, where, their two positions seem to, how well they aged, basically, how well their two stances aged. And it just turned into a shouting match. I'm only going to play one clip. But what I will say is that, again, I think this is an example of Kyle and Krystal in this instance just being out of touch and being too partisan. Cenk's whole point, if you actually listen to what Cenk was saying or trying to say when Krystal and Kyle were yelling over him, or what Cenk's been saying on other shows, all Cenk is saying is, and even Bernie Sanders, as Cenk pointed out, has said similar things. All Cenk is saying is that when there's overlap between progressives and MAGA, you should try to work with them, and you shouldn't call MAGA names because a MAGA voter is not going to want to vote for a party that calls them fascist and racist. That's Cenk's overall point. It's actually very simple. That when there's overlap where we agree, we should work together and we should name call MAGA because they're never going to want to vote for a Democrat if they feel like the Democratic Party just views them as fascist and racist. That's fundamentally, and also he wants to make the point that if MAGA doesn't deliver on the populist promises, then they look like hypocrites, and that also helps the left. That's Cenk's point. And I don't agree with either of them fundamentally, because I think putting aside the Iran coming war, which I do not support, and I think it will seriously damage Trump's presidency and his legacy if he goes through, but it looks like he is, but we'll see what happens. But other than that, I think Trump's presidency has been good overall. So obviously I don't agree with either one, because both Kyle and Krystal and Cenk, all three of them think Trump's been a bad president. I disagree. But if you just look at tactically, Cenk makes way more sense. In fact, even as a right winger, I'm much more concerned about what Cenk is arguing because I think Cenk can be effective. I don't think Kyle and Krystal's strategy of calling MAGA fascists is effective because that's just MSNBC. At that point, those are MSNBC, but they're always going to vote Democrat. You're not persuading anyone. Cenk could persuade people. I mean, the fact that I'm giving Cenk credit is just a sign that Cenk's strategy is more effective. And I'm going to play a clip from it because I think this clip sort of gets to the main point I'm trying to get at. It's a little bit of a long step, but I suggest go to, I kind of hate to say this, but I'll say go to Secular Talk's YouTube channel. He has, the 40-minute clip. And also, I'll say this, subscribe to the full Krystal and Kyle podcast so you can watch the whole thing. I'm not above saying that. But I'm going to play a clip of it because I think it gets to the whole point and why I think Cenk's argument was just stronger.
I will grant you, Cenk, is libertarians, so Thomas Massey and Dave Smith, because libertarians have a track record, like Ron Paul did, of being very principled, but everybody in MAGA, or 99% of them, will bend the knee, just like 99% of the ones in Congress have already bent the knee. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's saying things that are against the war, she's ultimately not signing on to the bill to block the war.
Okay, so here we go again. So again, 90-10, guys. The framing of that question makes it sound like I think Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson have good intent, and my God, they're ready to rebel on everything against Donald Trump.
I said Iran,
sir. No.
I said Iran.
And I just asked her a question.
But I didn't say that. I said Iran.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay. So I think then obviously 90% of the influencers, the hosts, etc., are going to stick with Trump 100%, right? Well, I wouldn't even say 90%. I'd say, 75% or so. Are they going to kiss his ass on everything? Well, of course they are. They're on the right, and their whole ecosystem is based on kissing politicians and leaders' asses. Now, let's be honest, not us and not you guys, but MSNBC and now a lot of online hosts on the left, their job is to kiss Democratic ass, and they say, oh, yeah, Joe Biden was young and dynamic, etc. So yes, we have the partisans, and they are, by definition, always going to stick with One side is green, the other side is the devil. Okay. So now when you get to the 25% of hosts, because now the reason I moved it from 10 to 25, because you're including Rogan and Cedric. So is Rogan the same as Steve Bannon? If you think he is, that's just totally wrong. Now, do they agree on a lot of things? Yes. Do they agree on everything? No. Is Steve Bannon right about most things? No. He's horribly, horribly wrong about most things. So will they, when Trump says heal, will they heal? In the beginning, yes. And that's exactly what you're seeing. But the reason they're having to heal is because they started rebelling in the first place. And Trump got mad and everybody else got mad. And even today, you just go on any website. So Bannon is saying don't go to war. It's terrible. You see then say, oh, the Donald Trump. Of course he is, because he's on that side. And then we see a lot of left-leaning hosts go, oh, well, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are corporate guys and they're bad, but we have to go with them anyway. Yes, we did. But look, you have to be honest about what's actually happening. So if you guys are saying, and I'm not trying to strawman you guys like you did, in my opinion, in the framing of every question. So I'm asking you, are you really, you're saying is all fake, and you think that all these right-wing hosts are not actually anti-war, that this is, but they've been telling their audience for months that the war is a terrible idea. Ask the question. And then the war is a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. But and how would that strategy work? So they get their audience totally against the war, then they capitulate to Trump.
Let me tell you how that strategy
works. How did that help them be?
Let me explain. Let me explain how
My answer to your question is yes, by the way. In 99% of cases, they're just lying and they'll go and suck them in.
Yeah, so you see, just based off that last part from Kyle, what a freaking partisan he is. If he really thinks that 90% of MAGA, or not 99% is what he said, of MAGA talk show hosts don't really believe in being anti-war, it just shows he's out of touch, man. That does not represent the majority of MAGA. Certainly does not represent the majority of MAGA voters, which he claimed that a majority of MAGA supports war and is on anti-war. So I just think that demonstrates that, as I was saying yesterday, maybe not as articulate as I could, but as I was saying yesterday, I just think he's not the same guy. He's just MSNBC on YouTube now. And if you can't see that, then again, enjoy his content, but I think you also are suffering from the same partisan disease that Kyle now has. Anyway, that's enough from Kyle Kulinski. We'll see if he does anything that warrants me doing another podcast on him in the near future. So that's it for this segment. Like I said, for the rest of the podcast, it's going to be the episodes that were through this past week. If you already heard them, feel free to end the podcast now. But if you hadn't, please stick around, listen. If you just see if you like the content or not, and if you do, please subscribe. You can subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever the hell you can get your podcasts. It should be available. Thanks for listening, guys. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. Welcome to a new edition of the Right Wing Populist podcast. I am the Right Wing Populist. So today I wanted to talk about the No Kings anti-Trump protests that quote-unquote swept the nation, as the mainstream media would like you to believe. And I want to talk about how, culturally, I just don't think they're as significant as the anti-Trump rallies were during the first term, and what that means and what the anti-Trump movement's future is going forward. So there were protests in a lot of the major cities throughout the country. No doubt, I don't want to pretend like no one showed up. Where I live, in an undisclosed location, there were protests. There were protests on bridges, and you had some people even outside of the main city protesting, which was kind of interesting. There's this fat dude who's outside the place where I work who constantly he's outside with an unbuttoned shirt that doesn't fit him properly. His big old belly sticking out, with like a sign that says something to the effect of Trump wants to be a king, but we won't let him, some gay shit like that. And I think that individual, the fat guy, belly sticking out with the gay sign, sort of is the antipathy, or sort of is like the prime example of what the anti-Trump movement has become. No one cares. besides like the wine moms who watch MSNBC, did anyone really care about these anti-Trump protests? I mean, in 2016, like the Women's March and the big protests against Trump, like it was sort of a cultural phenomenon. Even us pro-Trump people had to admit that there was a real energy behind these anti-Trump protests and, during his first term. And frankly, it makes sense. Trump was less popular then than he was now. I mean, remember, he lost the popular vote in 2016. I mean, his win was a surprise to begin with, but then when he not only won, but lost the popular vote, I think it just blew a bunch of the libs' minds. They couldn't take it. And they let out all their anger by these massive protests. And also, the whole Women's March thing, this was in the midst of the Me Too era. And, let's be honest, I think a lot of the Me Too, the whole goal was ultimately to get Trump because of Trump, having a little bit of a sketchy past, having cheating on his wives, whatnot, whatever you think of that. He's admitted to it to some degree. And I do think ultimately the goal of the Me Too movement was to get Trump. And I think that helped fuel, these anti-Trump protests during 2016. Now it's just not the same. Trump won the popular vote this time. The Me Too movement is sort of dead, at least the extreme, unreasonable parts of it. There's a reason why Mark Halperin's come back to popularity. I mean, he was originally canceled by Me Too. Now he's back and arguably bigger than ever for not being on a mainstream media outlet. And the only reason he's been able to come back is because large sections of the Me Too movement has been discredited. So that's not a factor now. And the other thing, contrary to what, a lot of the protesters were saying this past weekend, people support Trump's immigration policies, at least what he ran on. He made some stupid statements about amnesty this past week that, I'm not going to get into too much, but he suggested that, illegal immigrants who work on farms and resorts don't need to be deported, some stupid shit like that. But what Trump ran on, deporting all the illegal immigrants, mass deportations, that's popular now. That's what people want to hear. That's what they want. So, yes, there is a sort of a minority group of people who don't want that, and that's what these ICE protests and these No King protests were about. But the energy is just not there because the majority of people actually agreed with what Trump said. I mean, there's been polling that says a majority of Americans approved Trump sending the National Guard to stop the riots in California. And that was the pretext for these protests, was Trump trying to deploy the National Guard and these libtards claiming he was trying to be a king. But the people support that. They supported. They didn't want a repeat of 2020 when Trump was much more cautious with trying to send in federal help when these riots were happening during the summer of love in 2020. So it just seems like the energy isn't there. And also, the base of the anti-Trump movement now is boomers. It's old people. In 2016, it was young people. Now it's old people. Okay. And, no disrespect to boomers and older people, but, just aesthetically, from an aesthetic point of view, it looks a little corny when you have, people coming out of their retirement homes to go onto the street and they have to carry, a walker or a cane. And these are the people who are protesting against the president of the United States, people who can barely walk without assistance. I mean, these are the people that we're talking about. As opposed to 2016, you had these, young, full of energy young people protesting of who they thought was an illegitimate president. They were wrong, obviously, but that's what they thought and believed. And now you have, people who, try to make sure they get the early morning special at Denny's who are out protesting Trump. So the energy is just not the same. I'm not saying, numbers wise, the crowds, it does seem like some of the crowds were relatively big. And it was probably the biggest anti-Trump protest of this current administration, the second administration. The energy is just not there. Culturally, it's just not the same. It seems to me. Let me know in the comments if you think their energy is the same as it was the first time. I mean, to be fair, one of the reasons the energy probably doesn't feel the same is Trump is term limited. He wasn't in this first term, obviously. Now he is. So the stakes do seem a little bit lower. Maybe that's why the protests seem less important. I don't know. But that's just, honestly, as a Trump supporter, like, The women's march protests against Trump did kind of concern me during his first term. These protests just this past weekend just did not concern me. I just don't see the anti-Trump fever. No matter what there's been some stupid polls that have come out from like Quinnipiac that have shown Trump's approval, way below water. Don't believe those polls. Quinnipiac is an awful pollster. They should not be taken seriously. I mean, the fact that they still even are taken seriously it's just ridiculous. So, anyway, I was not impressed with the protest. I mean, I give credit to the fat guy whose belly hangs out of his shirt for being consistent. He's been out there since Trump was inaugurated, protesting Trump out. Even now in summer, in the hot summer, he's all sweaty and fat and shit and putting up his gay sign. He is committed. But I do think that sort of epitomizes the whole anti-Trump movement now. Old, fat people who have nothing better to do with their time. And it's kind of sad. One last thing I really wanted to talk about. Last week was not a great week for the Trump administration. I will say that. In fact, it was so bad, part of me even thought about joining the protest. That's how bad it was. No, I'm just kidding. But as I said, Trump said something stupid about immigration, saying that, like I said, farm workers and resort workers maybe shouldn't be deported, which makes Trump look like a hypocrite because he owns several resorts. So whoever came up with that idea, you're not helping Trump politically. I mean, if you want to make him look like a hypocrite or a corrupt hypocrite, okay, but I don't think that's the goal of the administration. So just a weird comment. I guess it was Secretary Rollins who does agriculture. I believe that's her last name. Robert Barnes, who I'm a big fan of, has gone on the warpath against her, saying she needs to leave. Barnes is a great guy. He's really committed to America first. So if he thinks this Rollins character needs to go, we need her out. I mean, Secretary of Agriculture, I believe, is the position. And if she's the one who's giving Trump these retarded ideas to not deport and not, and to give amnesty, essentially, for farm workers and resort workers, then she needs to go. So I think that's noteworthy. And again, I've talked about this on Saturday and a little bit on Friday, but what Trump has been saying about the Israel-Iran war now, essentially, is very concerning. He's refused to rule out sending in American troops to help Israel. We cannot get into another Middle Eastern war. We just cannot. The whole point of Trump, this is the 10-year anniversary of when he went down the escalator. Trump's been the center of our politics for 10 years now. Amazing. And I want to celebrate the fact that it's a 10-year anniversary, but I can't when he's making comments that are really concerning me that he's thinking about sending in troops to help Israel. You can't do that. The whole point of electing Donald Trump is the fact that he's supposed to be able to resist the pressures to get us into war. That's the whole, sales pitch, is that he's such a motherfucker that he'll be able to go up against any special interests and do what's best for the American people. That's sort of implicitly and sort of explicitly the whole appeal to Trump and why we want him. And he ran on not getting us into any new wars during his first term, which was a major accomplishment. I don't want to undermine it. But that's why I had faith to vote for him again, because I thought, well, he's not going to get us into another foreign conflict because he didn't in the first term. But I'm really concerned about some of the rhetoric I'm hearing from him. So the anti-war voices in the administration and of influence, like J.D. Vance, like Donald Trump Jr., do your best you can to convince Trump not to send troops to help Israel, because if he does, he will ruin his legacy, ruin his second administration, and we'll definitely have a Democrat back in the White House by 2029 if that happens. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening. Please subscribe. You can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can get your podcast. I don't care. Just subscribe. Whether it's YouTube, I kind of prefer YouTube, but whether it's YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, just subscribe. Thank you for listening, folks. I'll be back tomorrow. Bye-bye. Hello, welcome to a new edition of the Right Wing Populist podcast. I am the Right Wing Populist. So today I want to discuss whether or not Trump is going full neocon. That's something I didn't expect to have to talk about during his second term, but unfortunately, the question has to be asked, is Trump gone full neocon? The last 5 days, really the last 9 days, have been arguably the worst 9 days of either of his two administrations. With what he had to say about immigration, talking about amnesty for workers on big farms and resorts, to now allowing Israel to strike Iran and potentially sending our soldiers and weaponry to now help Israel fight Iran. It's been a disaster. Now, the one good news is it does appear, according to the Washington Post, the administration is walking back those guidelines, the new guidelines they had about not deporting illegal immigrants who are working on farms and at resorts. So that's good. I think that shows that, the administration will still respond to public backlash from the base. And that's good to know because we need the base to mobilize to prevent Trump from doing the same mistake George W. Bush made and get the U.S. involved in another foreign war in the Middle East. We can't have that happen. It destroyed Bush's presidency. It would destroy Trump's second presidency. We can't allow it. And it's been very disturbing to hear some of the things Trump has said recently. He was asked about Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson's been on the warpath trying to prevent war with Iran. He's been going on Steve Bannon. He's been going on his own show he had Steve Bannon on his podcast, and then he went on Steve Bannon's War Room show. He's been making it clear that if Trump, and he's been on social media saying that if Trump goes to war with Iran, it will destroy his presidency and will destroy MAGA and destroy the anti-war coalition that helped Trump get elected. And Trump was asked about Tucker Carlson's criticism at the G7, and he had this to say.
Carlson, you criticized you saying that you're complicit in the war.
I don't know what Tucker Carlson is saying. Let him go get a television network and say it so that people listen. Thank you.
Trump went on to then criticize Tucker Carlson on Truth Social, saying, "Somebody please explain to kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon," all caps. So it's like, Trump, when are you gonna grow up, man? I love you. It's been 10 years since you went down the escalator. I basically been supporting you since day one. But Jesus Christ, man. Attacking one of your most prominent media supporters during all this time, Tucker Carlson, because he's rightly calling you out for betraying your promise to not get us involved in any Middle Eastern conflicts. I mean, grow up, man. I'm sorry. I mean, you can't defend this. Like, I've defended Trump throughout the years, through college, high school, with friends, family. Defended this guy, trying to push against, the caricature that he's this, this blowhard who's crass and doesn't care about the world and only cares about himself. But when he says stupid shit like that about one of his biggest supporters in the media, it's like, I can't defend that. It's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? He's trying to help. Tucker's trying to help you, man. He's trying to help you he's trying to stop you from destroying your own presidency. And you call him kooky, which, by the way, is one of the lamest nicknames Trump has ever come up with. Maybe Trump's just too old now. I don't know. That was a terrible one. Kooky Tucker Carlson. Good one, man. I mean, you still have it. You still have your fastball, obviously. I mean, God damn, this is just... I'm sorry, I can't defend this. I love Trump, but he's about to make the biggest mistake of either of his two presidencies, sending troops to help Israel fight Iran, and he's criticizing people who are trying to help him. We're trying to help him. We're not trying to hurt you, Trump. We're trying to help you. Look, Iran. First off, I don't believe Iran is really close to getting a nuclear weapon. Bibi Netanyahu has been saying that for 30 damn years. He's been saying for 30 years that Iran's just around the corner from getting a nuclear weapon. It's never been true. It's very doubtful it's true now. This is the playbook we run. This is the playbook the neocons always run. They say that some Middle Eastern country has weapons of mass destruction, so we need to, send our troops over there to stop it so there can be peace in the region. It's always a lie. And it's the same shit, and people are falling for it again. You see these MAGA influencers who are defending this, who are defending the potential military action. Now, to be fair, some of these people are not really MAGA. Mark Levin's is not really MAGA. Ben Shapiro's never really been MAGA. These are people who were never Trump in 2016 during the 2016 Republican primaries. So they're not really MAGA, but they are, they're seen as MAGA influencers, and they're pushing the same damn lies that the neocons that support regime change always put out there. And the other reason why we know that Iran's not close to a nuclear weapon is because Trump's own director of national intelligence told him they're not. Tulsi Gabbard, a month and a half, 2 months ago, released a report saying that Iran is not actively trying and is not close to getting a nuclear weapon. This is Trump. This is who Trump appointed, Tulsi Gabbard, the national intelligence. And in fact, he was also asked about Tulsi Gabbard, I think, on Air Force One. And then Trump had this to say about it.
You've always said that you don't believe Iran should be able to have a nuclear weapon. But how close do you personally think that they were to getting one? Because Tulsi Gabbard testified at Barnes that the intelligence community said Iran wasn't building a nuclear weapon.
I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having.
So I don't know how well you people are able to hear that. The audio quality wasn't that good, on the airplane. But Trump was asked by, I think, the CNN reporter, I think Collins, asked him about, how close Iran really is to a nuclear weapon, because Tulsi Gabbard testified that they weren't close. And then Trump said, I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to a nuclear weapon. It's like you're throwing your director of national intelligence under the bus like that. It's like, again, I can't defend this. Tulsi Gabbard's a patriot, and, she stuck her neck out for him. She was a former Democrat. Okay. You don't have to be disrespectful the way Trump was with her. I'm sorry. I don't want to be like, oh, Trump's rude, Trump's mean, because in the past it hasn't bothered me. So I don't want to be a hypocrite now that Trump's being critical of people I like and is for policies I don't support, that I want to, language police him. But Jesus Christ, man. It's like, get your shit together, dude. You look incompetent. You're just agreeing with your own. The director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard knows much more about how close Iran is to a nuclear weapon than frickin' Ben Shapiro, Mark Levin, and Sean Hannity. Okay? And those are the people you're listening to? Why was Tulsi Gabbard not allowed during this meeting with Camp David that happened a week or so ago? Trump had all these national security advisors and people. They all went to Camp David, but Tulsi Gabbard was excluded. And shortly after the meeting at Camp David, Israel launches their attack on Iran. What's that all about? And this is what Trump does. When Trump, this has been well documented, unfortunately. This is just a character flaw Trump has. When Trump has made his mind on something, he doesn't want to hear counter opinions. He doesn't want to hear alternative thought. He doesn't want to hear any dissent. So, even if these people are in his cabinet or in his circle, he'll just ignore them. Or he'll create a distance between him and the people, even if they're trying to help him. I thought Trump had learned his lesson. Apparently he hasn't. And he's a man in his 70s, almost 80 now, so I guess it was sort of naive for me to think. But I thought Trump had learned that you cannot listen to the neocons, that these people were the reasons why there were mistakes during his first administration. And the whole reason you appoint someone like Tulsi Gabbard is to make sure you don't make the same mistakes. But then when she tries to do her job, you say you don't care what she has to say? What the hell? This is why why the real MAGA people like Tucker Carlson, others, Steve Bannon, Robert Barnes, Richard, that's why these people are, they're concerned that you're going full neocon, Mr. President. We do not need a fourth George W. Bush term. 3 were enough. The first term of HW and then the 2 terms of W, that was enough Bush for us. Okay, we don't need any more Bush. Okay, we're at a gay bar now. We don't need any more. We don't want any Bush. It's like the people at a gay bar. They're not looking for Bush. We weren't looking for Bush when we elected you, Mr. President, for a second term. Okay, we're not looking for another fucking regime change war in the Middle East. Okay. So I think there's 3 possibilities. I think there's a possibility that Trump is looking for an off-ramp, meaning that he's actually trying to look like he's about to attack Iran to basically force Iran's hand to get them to the negotiating table to get a deal done, to get the deal that Trump wants. I think that's a real possibility. And there was some reports in Axios that Trump is trying to get a ceasefire deal done. Now, he disputed that on Truth Social, so I don't know how true that is or not, but there is so I think that's a possibility. I think the second possibility is that to the extent the U.S. is going to be involved, it's just going to be bombing nuclear facilities in Iran or they're doing enrichment. And we won't actually, it'll be sort of like what Trump was doing in Syria, where we're just in airplanes and we're just dropping bombs on, targeted areas. Now, that'll probably lead to civilian casualties. So I don't support that. But I think that would be that wouldn't be as big of a mistake. The third possibility is that no, we'll actually, we'll get super involved. We may even put troops on the ground and we'll try to actually overthrow the regime. And the U.S. working with Israel, we will try to overthrow the Iran's current regime. That would be a disaster. And, that would destroy Trump's presidency. So hopefully he doesn't do that. Hopefully he's not George W. Trump and he's Donald Trump still. And he's, and that again, what he's really doing is the first option where he's just trying to force Iran's hand to get a deal done. But I don't know. It's just unfortunate that around literally the 10-year anniversary of Trump going on that escalator, he has to be doing potentially the biggest mistake of either of his presidencies. So, look, by the way, to the MAGA people who subscribe, I don't like saying this. I love Trump. I have so many MAGA hats. To my friends listening, they know this is true. I have so many Trump hats and Trump shirts. I've loved Trump since I was in high school. Since I was, young, and I defended him. I get with stupid college professors, high school professors, libtard family members. I don't like criticizing him, but I'm not going to let him destroy his presidency over Israel. Okay, that's not happening. And two, principles over, personality. I care much more about being anti-war than I care about just defending Trump. So that's the reality. So here's hoping. Trump's just looking for an off-ramp. I think that's a possibility. There's some reporting that could be the possibility. So let's hope. And if you're religious, pray that this doesn't escalate into another regime change war in the Middle East, because that would just be a disaster. So anyway, guys, I'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you have a good day. Bye-bye. Hello, welcome to a new edition of the Right Wing Populist Podcast. I am the Right Wing Populist. So today I wanted to mostly talk about the big interview Tucker Carlson released with Ted Cruz that's been, going viral on the internet. First off, this was Tucker at the peak of his powers. It was very impressive. Frankly, it was, I think, the best interview I've seen done with a top public official by any journalist. Not ever, but certainly in a very long time. I remember once Bill O'Reilly did a pretty tough interview with Dick Cheney, believe it or not, about Iraq years after, the catastrophe that was Iraq. But this was just Tucker at his best. And it exposed a couple things. Number one, it exposed that Ted Cruz is a tool. We already kind of knew that just based off 2016 and his inability to, go after Trump with substance. Instead, he tried using all these tricks to get extra delegates by using, these convention technicality rules. He's just always been sort of a slimy guy. And this interview / really debate, but this interview kind of reminded us of that. I mean, I guess apparently in college he was like a debate champ. I've never seen it. I never thought he did particularly well in those debates against Trump in 2016 during those primary debates. And during this interview, he kept doing these stupid fucking, fallbacks whenever he was confronted with good points by Tucker. He did the classic, "Why are you asking so many questions about Israel, bro? why don't you ask about China? Why don't you ask about Russia? Why are you so obsessed with Israel, bro? Is it because they're Jewish, bro? He did one of those, this typical, I can't, respond to your substantive criticism of Israel, so I'm going to essentially accuse you of being anti-Semitic. And Tucker, to his great credit, called him out for it. In fact, I will play the clip right now because it's just embarrassing that Cruz would resort to tactics like this.
You think that it's just interesting because what you're now describing in a very defensive way, I will say, is foreign influence over our politics. Now, and you began, and it's so transparently obvious to everybody. I don't know why you would be embarrassed of it. You said that you were sincerely for Israel. I believe you. I don't think you have some weird agenda. You seem to. By the way, Tucker, it's a very weird thing. The obsession with Israel. When we're talking about foreign countries, an obsession. You're not talking about Chinese. You're not talking about Japanese. You're not talking about the Brits. You're not talking about the French. The question, what about the Jews? What about the Jews? Oh, I'm an anti-Semite now. Senator, you're asking the question. Stop. That's me. You're asking, why are the Jews controlling our foreign policy? That's what you just asked. Hardly saying that. And I have... That is exactly what you just said. Well, actually, I can speak for myself and tell you what I am saying. Good. On behalf not simply of myself, but of my many Jewish friends who would have the same questions, which is to what extent, it's interesting you're trying to derail my questions by calling me an anti-Semite, which you are. I did not. Of course you are. And rather than be honorable enough to say it right to my face, I'm sitting in a sleazy feline way implying it, or just asking questions about the Jews. I'm asking questions about the Jews. There's nothing to do with Jews or Judaism. It has to do with foreign government. Isn't Israel controlling our foreign policy? That's not about the Jews. You said, I'm asking. And by the way, you're the one that just called me, I think, a sleazy feline. So let's be clear. It's sleazy to imply that I'm an anti-Semite, which you just did. No, I just said, why is that the only question you're asking? You answer it. Give me another reason. If you're not an anti-Semite, give me another reason why the obsession is Israel. I am in no sense obsessed with Israel. We are on the brink of war with Iran. And so these are valid questions. But you're not.
Yeah, Ted Cruz is a faggot. I mean, Jesus Christ. What a fucking faggot. Tucker asked to what extent Israel is influencing United States policy, and then Cruz says, why are you asking me if the Jews are running the United States? It has nothing to do with Jews. And this is why it's just not, it's just so lazy. It's so lazy. People who defend Israel and AIPAC, they always have to go, oh, why do you care? Why are you so obsessed with Jews? It's like, Israel is a foreign country, okay? Obviously, it's a Jewish state, okay? Now, they make the point all the time, the Israel defenders, that Israel allows people of other faiths to live there peacefully, which is true, seemingly. I mean, that seems to be true. So they always make that point. So, there's plenty of non-Jews who live in Israel, but obviously it's the Jewish state. There's no question about that. But just because, again, criticizing Israel does not mean you're criticizing Jews. The type of people, look, are there anti-Semitic people who criticize Israel because of Judaism? Of course. Of course. Those people exist. I would say Nick Fuentes is one of those people, which I've covered extensively in many of my other podcasts. Please check them out. Available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe. So I understand that, but the vast majority of certainly anti-interventionists on the left and right, people like Glenn Greenwald, people like Tucker Carlson, others, people like Jimmy Dore, these people are not criticizing Israel because it's a Jewish state. They're criticizing Israel because of the influence it has on the American government. And the concern is that the influence that it has on the American government is coming at the expense of the American people. That's the concern. The concern isn't, they're Jews. No one gives a shit about Israel being Jewish. I mean, again, I say that I understand that there are anti-Semitic people like Richard Spencer, people like Nick Fuentes, who are legitimately anti-Israel because of the Jews. Okay, I understand that. But Tucker Carlson is not one of those people. Tucker Carlson has been very pro-Israel for years, as he pointed out during his interview with Ted Cruz. People like Steve Bannon, who's been very critical of Israel lately. He's been pro-Israel in the past. Many of these people who are trying to prevent Trump from going to war with Iran over Israel have been very pro-Israel in the past. People like Robert Barnes, people like Richard Barris, great people, great patriots, who have defended Israel in the past, but are now calling out AIPAC, now calling out Israel, because we're trying to prevent Trump from destroying his presidency. That's the reality. It's nothing to do with them being Jewish. We don't care. I certainly don't care. When I was a kid growing up, two of my closest friends were Jewish. They had family directly from Israel. I have nothing against Jews. I just don't want Israel to be dictating our foreign policy. Particularly, I will admit, when it has to come with the president I have personal affection for, Donald Trump. One of my favorite things about Trump's first presidency was he was the first president in decades to not start a new war since Jimmy Carter. He was the first president. It was an amazing accomplishment. Now, he could have done more. He should have got us out of more of the foreign conflicts other presidents had gotten us into. So he was not perfect by any means when it came to war. But he was, again, the first president not to get us into a new conflict. And that was a great accomplishment. And there were times where people in his first administration did try to pressure him to go to war with Iran, and he resisted. He resisted. Now he's not resisting for some reason. Is it because Trump's just gotten older and he just doesn't have the wherewithal? Does he think maybe Israel was behind the 2 assassination attempts? That's very conspiratorial, but maybe he thinks that. I don't know. I just don't get why all of a sudden he's just... I mean, look, it is true he's been saying Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, but he's been always resistant to actually starting a new conflict. But now he seems gung-ho to do it. And that was the other thing during this interview that Cruz kept saying, and it's very obvious what's happening here. The neocons are trying to use Trump because they know Trump has such high approval in the Republican base. They're trying to use Trump as political cover to do regime change in Iran. That's obvious. I mean, and the other thing is Ted Cruz, he got, Tucker accused Ted Cruz of being a neocon, and Ted Cruz got defensive. Ted Cruz is obviously a neocon. Like, neocons don't like calling themselves neocons because they know the term is so toxic now after the disaster that was the George W. Bush presidency. But you just listen to the interview with Tucker and Ted Cruz. He's obviously a neocon. Every single position a neocon would have, Ted Cruz has. Okay. He's a neocon. And what the neocons are doing now, they're trying to use Trump as political cover to support regime change in Iran. And one of the ways they are doing it is what Bibi himself did during an interview with Fox News, is say that Iran is trying to kill Trump. And Bibi implied that the 2 assassination attempts were Iran was behind them. Now, Ted Cruz, to his credit, I guess, conceded that those accusations weren't true from Bibi, that he quote-unquote misspoke. I'm not exactly sure how Bibi would have misspoken there. It was very clear what he said, but anyway. But Cruz is defending the claim still that Iran is trying to kill Trump. And Tucker basically called him out beautifully, saying that if you really believe that, you'd be directly advocating that we attack Iran and go to war with Iran. And I'll play the clip here because, again, it exposes the scam that Ted Cruz and the neocons are playing right now.
But I just want to pull that thread because it's so important. I voted for Donald Trump. I campaigned for Donald Trump. Yeah. He's our president. And we're on the cusp of a war. So if there's evidence that Iran paid hitmen to kill Donald Trump and is currently doing that, where is that? Like, what are you even talking? I've never heard that before. Okay, where is the evidence? Who are these people? Why haven't they been arrested? Why are we not at war with Iran?
That's a great question to ask.
How do you know that that's true?
We know that it's true because we have been told that by the military and our intelligence community for the last 2 years.
We meaning who?
Congress has and the public. I mean, we had multiple testimonies. I can send you testimony.
Do we know the names of the people or where this happened or what they tried to do to kill Trump?
We have not apprehended an Iranian hitman trying to kill him. We know that Iran is trying to do so.
In the United States?
Yes. And by the way, like Iran...
This just seems like a huge headline, and you're acting like everyone knows this. I didn't know that.
Iran put out a whole video about murdering Trump.
Right, but I've never heard evidence that there are hitmen in the United States. I mean, trying to kill Trump right now, we should have a nationwide dragnet on this, and we should attack Iran immediately if that's true. Don't you think?
No.
But they're trying to assassinate our president?
They have been for 2 years.
They are our enemies. War with them.
Well, We are trying to.
Why don't we just nuke Tehran if they're trying to murder our president? There's nothing that you could do that would be worse for the United States than murdering Trump. And I just don't
Amen. I
understand
agree with
why
that.
you're not calling for the use of nuclear weapons against the Ayatollah right now. I'm serious. If you really believe they're
The
going to
use
murder
of nuclear weapons. See,
whenever part of the problem of
Now, I think Tucker's saying we should use nuclear weapons is, a little bit extra. It's kind of a silly comment. But Tucker's overall point is obviously correct. If we really believed Iran was trying to assassinate Trump, we'd all, and there was a serious threat of it, we would already be in a direct conflict with Iran. And that's obviously true. So, anyway, I recommend listening to the whole interview. I just played a couple clips that I thought were the most telling part. Obviously, the most viral part of the interview was when, Tucker asked Cruz, if you're calling for regime change, what do you know about the country? Like, what's the population size? And Cruz didn't know anything about the Iranian population. It's just embarrassing. And by the way, the defenders posting these memes about like Star Wars, with someone asking Luke Skywalker, what was the population of the Death Star? It's like, really? First off, the rebels were the terrorists in Star Wars. I mean, that's the kind of the funny part. But putting that aside, it's Star Wars, it's fiction, it's retarded. Okay, the point is that you should know about the population of a country if you're calling for regime change, which Ted Cruz is. Ted Cruz did say in the interview he wants regime change in Iran. Okay. This is a United States senator who said that one of his main goals for becoming a senator and one of his main goals to do as senator was to be the leading defender of Israel. A United States senator said one of the main reasons he became a senator was to be the leading protector and defender of Israel, a foreign country in the Middle East, which he himself recognizes spies on us, including spying on our president, and does not routinely share all the intel that the Mossad gathers. Okay? This is the United States. This is one of our United States senators. It's just gross. And, look, I don't want to shit on Israel, but it's becoming more clear and clear what the whole game here is. The reason why we haven't gotten more information on Jeffrey Epstein is because he almost certainly was working with the Mossad in Israel. And we don't want to release that information because it will make it harder for us to help Israel in its new war with Iran. And the other reason why we haven't heard more information about the 2 assassination attempts against Trump is because the deep state and the administrative state wants to create the impression, like Bibi was trying to do, that Iran was behind those 2 assassination attempts. Okay, it's becoming more and more clear what the game here is, and it's gross. And unfortunately, it looks like, they're winning the game, because it does look like by the weekend, we will have begun striking Iran, the United States, directly, as opposed to just indirectly helping Israel at the moment. So we live in dangerous times. Hopefully, Trump comes to his senses the last second and refuses to get us entangled in another Middle Eastern war, but I would say the odds are against it. Anyway, that's it for today. Please subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you can get your podcasts. It should be available. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye-bye. Hello, welcome to a new edition of the Right Wing Populist Podcast. I am the Right Wing Populist. First off, just want to clarify, I am not AI. A lot of the Democrat libtards who listen to this podcast, who didn't like the podcast I did about the No Kings Trump protests, a lot of the comments were saying, oh, he's AI. I'm not AI. The reason I'm anonymous is there's no reason to put my name out publicly yet. But I'll say this, if we get to 5,000 subscribers, I will reveal my true name, and I'll post a picture of me on social media so you can see my beautiful face. And if the podcast continues to do well, I will add a video format for the podcast so you just don't have to, so there's just not an audio version. Even for YouTube, it's just audio, fundamentally, right? But if the podcast continues to grow, and the viewership the past 2 weeks has been great, but the viewership continues to grow, I'll add a video format so you can look at my beautiful face as I make these amazing political points. Anyway, on today's show, and remember, please subscribe. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on YouTube, wherever you can get your podcasts. The podcast is essentially available everywhere. So please remember to subscribe. So on today's show, I wanted to talk about what is America First exactly, because there's been a lot of debate regarding what America First is. You have a lot of former neocons or current neocons suggesting that bombing Iran is America First. Getting us entangled with a potential regime change war, according to these neocons, actually is America First. And they justify it by saying that, President Trump has been saying for 10 years that Iran can't get a nuclear weapon. And by the way, that's true. Trump has been saying for a long time now that he doesn't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. But what they leave out is that Trump has also said he doesn't want us to get entangled in another stupid Middle Eastern war. And Trump also said Trump would say during the campaign trail, even in 2024, that Iran can get a nuclear weapon, but he would heavily imply that it'd be resolved through peaceful negotiations. He would often say he wants Iran to do well, but they can't have a nuclear weapon. Well, bombing the shit out of Iran is not them doing well, obviously. So the implication, especially when you take into account Trump always saying he wants to keep us out of stupid wars, the implication was clear that Trump was going to try to negotiate a peaceful solution, not, bomb Iran. But, the neocons leave that part out, and the clips are available. They're available on Twitter X. You can tell the White House is feeling the heat from the base regarding potentially sending in troops to bomb Iran, because they've been posting all these videos of Trump saying Iran can have a nuclear weapon. Look, it's perfectly reasonable to not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. That's not really the question. The question is it America first? The question isn't whether or not it's America first for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. The question is it America first to bomb and potentially send in American troops to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon? That's the question. I mean, you see these idiots on Fox News saying, it's not America first to let Iran get a nuclear weapon. Well, that's not the question. The question is, what are you willing to do to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon? Yes, is it America first for Iran, like in a perfect world, for them to get a nuclear weapon? Not necessarily. Iran said a lot of bad things about the United States. But the idea they're an actual threat to us is stupid. And it's certainly not America first to get us entangled in another stupid Middle Eastern war. Especially when the reality is Israel wants regime change in Iran. Can we just be honest here? They don't really care. I mean, they care, but they don't really. This is a pretext. The idea of Iran getting a nuclear weapon, that's just a pretext for what Israel is doing. Okay? That's why Bibi's been saying Iran's close to a nuclear weapon for the last 30 years. They want regime change. Okay? Israel can't really do regime change without the backing of the United States. That's why they've been pushing this lie on the American people and all our last several presidents that Iran is close to a nuclear weapon. So they have a pretext to do regime change. And they need the United States backing to do that. So when people talk about, it's not America first to let Iran get a nuclear weapon. Well, is it America first to do regime change? Because that's what this is ultimately about. That's what Israel wants. And there's even been some reporting by some online lefty influencers like Ken, I'm not sure to say his last name, Klippenstein. I apologize, I'm probably not saying his last name correctly, but he's a pretty prominent, reporter. He's a very left-wing guy, but he's done some good reporting in the past, and he's reporting that Trump's given Israel the green light to replace the current regime in Iran. I really hope he's wrong about that. I hope that report is wrong, because that means we are going to get involved. Because the only way there's going to be regime change in Iran is if we are directly involved. That's the reality. So is that America first? So again, this is the whole point. When people say it's not America first to let Iran get a nuclear weapon, it's like, Iran having a nuclear weapon doesn't really impact America first, one way or another, because it doesn't directly impact us to begin with. Because is Iran going to nuke Nebraska? I mean, let's not be retarded here. Iran wants a nuclear weapon, even if they even do. But assuming they do, the reason they want it is that they want to prevent regime change. So to the extent Israel actually cares about Iran getting a nuclear weapon, it's so because they know if Iran does get a nuclear weapon, it's much more difficult to do regime change. That's the whole issue, right? I mean, nuclear weapon. That's why Kim Jong-un was unwilling to give up his nuclear weapons during the peace talks with Trump during Trump's first term. Trump wasn't able to get a long-term peace deal with Kim Jong-un because Kim Jong-un was all like, I know we have a good relationship, Mr. President, but you're going to be gone eventually. And if I don't have my nuclear weapons, I'm going to be overthrown. Hell, you could even say that with Ukraine. Ukraine didn't have any nuclear weapons, and the United States basically did a coup in 2014 and replaced them with a government we preferred. I've already talked about previously in the podcast what happened with Libya and Gaddafi. Gaddafi gave up his nuclear weapons as a good faith token to the West and the United States, and we overthrew him anyway, years later. We wouldn't have been able to overthrow them if he had nuclear weapons, if he had his nuclear weapons still. So to the extent this is really about nuclear weapons, it's all about regime change. Israel wants regime change. The neocons want regime change. I'm not sure what Trump really wants. I think he's been convinced, unfortunately, by neocons and former never Trumpers, ironically, people like Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro, others. Trump has seemingly been convinced by them that Iran is close to a nuclear weapon and that the best action forward is to strike them. Now, today, Trump was asked about that, and to be fair to the president, he's saying that he's not looking, if he does strike Iran, he's not looking for a long-term war. He's just looking for a quick strike to take out their nuclear capabilities. I will play the clip now so you can hear it for yourself.
People in the base don't want a long-term war. They're afraid that we're going to get into a long-term war. We're looking for a long-term war. We're looking, I only want one thing. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Right. That's it. I'm not looking long-term, short-term. And I've been saying that for 20 years. I've been saying it as a civilian who got a lot of publicity. People would cover it. Very simply, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Sure. It's not a question of anything else. And if you did, you wouldn't have much of a country because they would use it on us and would use it on other people.
So it's good to hear Trump say he's not looking for a long-term war. Again, it's not the most reassuring thing, honestly, the way he said it. I will say, because again, when he says Iran can get a nuclear weapon, at this point it looks like the only way that's going to happen is with America intervening in the region. And what Trump doesn't mention in that clip is he also promised not to get us entangled in any more stupid Middle Eastern wars. Remember, one of the things that really brought Trump to prominence in the Republican primary in 2016 was calling out Jeb Bush to his face for his brother and father's, but mostly his brother's stupid wars. Iraq, Afghanistan. And now Trump is looking to make the same fucking mistake George W. Bush made. It's just insane. It's not America first. Look, unfortunately, the whole Republican Party just may be a lost cause. Because all the Republicans are totally in favor of the United States striking Iran. Lindsey Graham, when he's, not busy hitting on 18 and 19-year-old men in D.C., he's on Fox News begging President Trump to strike Iran. Okay. In between, in between Lindsey Graham's gay orgies, he's on Fox News having a gay orgy with Sean Hannity, talking about how we need to strike Iran. This is who we have, Lindsey Graham. The guy who famously pretended like he was, just a bachelor when he was running for the Republican nomination in 2016, by the way. I think he was asked about potentially getting married to a woman, and he said, I just haven't met the right gal yet. If I'm president, we may have a couple of first ladies. Jesus Christ. Lindsey Graham. Okay. Anyway. But even people who I've used to like Ted Cruz. Tucker Carlson, I guess, just did an interview with Ted Cruz talking about the Iran situation, obviously. And he asked Cruz sort of a gotcha question, but also not an unreasonable question about how many people live in Iran, and Ted Cruz could not answer. It was super awkward. And I'll play the clip for you so you can hear it for yourself.
People live in Iran, by the way. I don't know the population. At all? No, I don't know the population. You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple? But how many people live in Iran? 92 million. Okay. Yeah, how could you not know that? I don't sit around memorizing population tables. Well, it's kind of relevant because you're calling for the overthrow of the government. Why is it relevant whether it's 90 million or 80 million or 100 million? Why is that relevant? Because if you don't know anything about the country... I didn't say I don't know anything about... Okay, what's the ethnic mix of Iran? They are Persians and predominantly Shia. Okay, it's not even... You don't know anything about Iran. So, okay, I am not the Tucker Carlson expert on Iran. You're a senator who's calling for the overthrow of the government. You're the one who claims about the country. No, you don't know anything about the country. You're the one who claims they're not trying to murder Donald Trump. You're the one saying that who can't figure out a saying you don't idea to kill General Soleimani, and you said it believe they're trying to murder Trump. Yes, I do. Because you're not calling for military strikes against them in retaliation. Okay, we believe that carrying out military strikes today. You said Israel was right with our help. I said we. Israel is leading them, but we're supporting them. Well, you're breaking news here because the U.S. government last night denied, the National Security Council spokesman Alex Pfeiffer denied on behalf of Trump that we were acting on Israel's behalf in any offensive capacity. We're not bombing them. Israel's bombing them. You just said we were. We are supporting Israel. You're a senator. If you're saying the United States government is at war with Iran right now, people are listening.
Jesus Christ, Ted Cruz is such a fucking tool. I knew I didn't like him just based off the 2016 primary. He was so, swarmy and just unlikable. His dad probably killed JFK too, which is also a negative, but just an unlikable guy. I mean, Jesus Christ. Just, by the way, shout out to Tucker. That's like Tucker Carlson at his best. He also being kind of smug, to be honest, but he's doing it for the right purposes, so we like it. But, yeah, that's another thing, by the way. This, one of the ways they're trying to push war is to suggest that Iran's trying to kill Trump. Even had Bibi, who was on Fox News the other day, I think I mentioned this earlier this week, suggesting that the two main assassination attempts against Trump, in Butler and at his golf course, one of his golf courses, was that Iran was behind them, citing no evidence, by the way. I mean, so... Yeah, that's one of the leading United States senators, the person who came in second to be the Republican nominee in 2016. He doesn't know anything about Iran, and he catches himself because he knows that we are helping Israel with these strikes so far, even though we're not directly involved. We are helping them. Tucker Carlson calls it out that you're acknowledging that we're helping him, and then he tries to walk it back by saying, no, Israel's doing strikes, but we're just helping them. God damn, Ted, you've become he's just a tool. He's a neocon at heart. This is the good thing. We're seeing who the neocons really are. So in 2028, we know not to vote for them. Now, Vance is a little bit of an exception, even though he is so far publicly supporting the strikes. There is some reporting from the New York Times, the libtard New York Times, but when they have good information, you have to acknowledge it. And the New York Times basically reported that Vance sort of sees this conflict with Iran as sort of inevitable. And he does not want a long conflict, and he's hoping he can convince the president that if we do strike Iran, to make it as calculated and precise as possible so we don't get into a long-term war. And Vance is Trump's VP. He has to support Trump publicly. So I'll give Vance will get a pass if he does come out in support of striking Iran. But everyone else, they don't get a pass. They're not working for Trump. They're not Trump's number two. So, again, going back to the original topic, is Iran getting a nuclear weapon America first? No. But is striking Iran and getting bogged into a regime change war America first? Hell no. Sending in troops or using troops to bomb Iran, that's not America first. It'll destroy Trump's presidency. War is unpopular. Richard Barris, the top pollster in the country, has been breaking this down for the last week, how if we go into war with Iran, the coalition that got Trump elected and the coalition that allowed a Republican to win the popular vote for the first time in 20 years, that'll be destroyed. Okay. Forget about winning the Midwest. You can't win the Rust Belt states if you're a Republican and you're seen as pro-war. That's why Trump was the first Republican in decades to win Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, because he was seen as the pro-peace candidate. And if he gets us bogged down to another Middle Eastern war, that is over. So we have to be careful. Okay. We don't want to be like Nick Fuentes and, be against striking Iran because we hate Israel because they're Jewish. I don't care that Israel's a Jewish state. I'm not into identity politics. I don't care. It has nothing to do with Israel being Jewish. Okay. My criticisms of Israel and not helping Israel. I don't care. I'm not like Fuentes. Okay. He's not an America First either. I'm sorry, Fuentes fans. Okay. Not supporting Israel just because fundamentally they're Jewish is a retarded reason to be against Israel. And I know Fuentes doesn't say it like that, but if you read between the lines, that's a lot of it. Okay, and he says stuff about Israel that isn't true. Israel did not support the United States getting, us going into Iraq. There are people within Israel, even within their government, who did, but the official position of Israel was not for us to go into Iraq. Remember that. So in Fuentes, like he was saying the other day, I think on Alex Jones or maybe on his own show, that Israel's been behind every single war, or Jews, I think he said just Jews have been behind every single war over the last, forever. That's bullshit. Okay, he's anti-Semitic. Nick Fuentes is anti-Semitic. That's why he hates Israel so much. It's not because he's principled against war or anything. I mean, I think he does prefer not to have war, but the main reason he's against us helping Israel is because it's a Jewish state. Let's be real about that. So, I don't know. You guys can cry about it in the comments. I don't care. That's just the truth. So, he's not America First either. He's not Israel First like Tim Pool says, to be fair, because that's just a stupid way of saying it. But he is obsessed with Israel because fundamentally they're Jewish. Okay, not for any other principled anti-war reason. Let's be honest. People who are against Israel for what they're doing now, the principled people like Robert Barge, Richard Baer, Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, they're not anti-Semitic. They're against what Israel's doing because they're principally against war, not principally against Jews. Okay, that is the America First position. The America First position is to be against war because war is bad. It's bad for the nation. It's bad for our young men. It's destabilizing for society. It's not because Jews run the world and we're against Jews. So I want to get that straight. So at the end of the day, I hope there's some reporting just this morning that maybe Trump officials are meeting with Iranian officials to maybe do a last-minute peace deal. I pray to God that's the case, but we'll see. Very high stakes. It's a very tentative situation right now. Hopefully it doesn't come to it, but just to be clear, getting involved in another Middle Eastern war is not America First. Remember that. Anyway, that's the show for today. Thank you for listening. We'll be back tomorrow. Like I said at the top, please subscribe wherever you can get your podcast. Hope you guys have a good day. Bye-bye. Hello, welcome to a new edition of the Right Wing Populist Podcast. I am the Right Wing Populist. Believe it or not, I am the Right Wing Populist. So on today's show, I wanted to talk about Kyle Kulinski, also known as Crystal Ball's husband. He runs the very popular, unfortunately popular, left-wing YouTube channel, Secular Talk. He's been around for over 10 years now, and, he was a very prominent Bernie Sanders supporter during the 2016 and 2020 Democrat primaries. He's always called himself, a progressive. He picked the name Secular Talk because of his atheism, not a fan of religion. And he's been very popular. The reason I want to talk about him is he famously predicted. So let me give you a little of history on him. When Trump first got elected, he was actually not that hostile towards Trump in the sense that he was fair. He didn't agree with most of Trump's policies, obviously, because, he's a left-winger, but he was fair to Trump. He would not give unfair criticisms of him. He famously helped debunk Russiagate. He was not a Russiagator by any means. He would debunk it often. Push other nonsense about obstruction of justice and all that crap. But on the main allegation of whether or not Trump had conspired with the Russian government, he was very good on that issue. Him and other left-wingers like Jimmy Dore. He was very good. And he was fair throughout Trump's administration. From his perspective, he was fair. I didn't often agree with his criticisms, different ideologies. But from his ideological perspective, many of his criticisms were fair. That's all you could ask from a left winger. Just be fair. Don't have different standards for a president just because they're, a Republican or a Democrat, depending on your own ideology. But it's when January 6th happened, I think something snapped in the guy. Like, he just became such a anti-Trump partisan ever since then. And what I mean by that is he totally supported the lawfare against Trump during, 2023 up until the election, 2024 election. He supported the effort to get Trump taken off the ballot. I don't know if you remember that, but you had all these libtards and left-wing interests and legal groups suing to take Trump off the ballot, using an absurd interpretation of the 14th Amendment. Ultimately, those cases lost. By the way, 9-0 in the Supreme Court. Even the liberal justices said states couldn't take Trump off the ballot. That's how absurd the legal theory was. But Kyle Kulinski, someone who says, "Oh, Trump's so anti-democratic. He hates democracy." It's like, well, dude, you were supporting you supported people not being allowed to vote for Donald Trump. You want to lecture him for being anti-democratic? You're anti-democratic. You wanted to prevent people from voting for the president they wanted. What could be more anti-democratic than that, you retard? Oh, Trump, he hates democracy. He's going to destroy democracy. At the same time, I don't want anyone to vote for the presidential candidate they want. It's like, okay, dude, you're so principled. You're so smart. Oh, you're so smart. I want to protect democracy. Quick, let's make sure no one can vote for the presidential candidate they want. It's like, okay, bro. And, he predicted that there was no chance once, Biden was replaced. He famously predicted that there was no way Harris could lose the presidential election. In fact, he did a prediction video and he predicted worst case scenario, Kamala Harris gets 276 electoral votes. Worst case. He said that there was no chance Donald Trump could win the presidential election. Okay, that's how insane and how much in the bubble he was with his anti-Trump retardation. He said there was no chance Donald Trump could win even though the polls were close. And many of them were high quality polls, Trump had the advantage. And Trump always outperforms the polls. And this dumbass was like, oh, Donald Trump can't win. There's no way he can win. I mean, that's how insane this guy had gotten. And I think Trump ultimately winning the 2024 election, made him go even more insane. Because he started having people on, retards like Greg Palast, saying that the 2024 election was stolen, that it wasn't legitimate. Kyle Kulinski's had those people on. He's promoted it. He has said that he believes Harris actually won the election, that she actually won Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, those states. He's also implied that Elon Musk may have stolen the election too. I don't think he's outright said, because the Greg Palast theory is that basically voter suppression caused Kamala Harris to lose. Because signature matches were enforced. Okay. That's how stupid Greg Palast is. And I'm not really, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not really. That really is his theory, that essentially election laws were followed to make sure that people didn't vote illegally. And because of that, Kamala Harris should have won. If election laws hadn't been enforced. That is basically his theory. He doesn't say it that way, obviously. But if you actually look at what his argument is because things like signature matches weren't enforced, which is the law, that's why Harris lost. His argument is because the laws were followed, Harris lost. Like, okay, great argument, dude. Big brain moment from Greg Palast, everyone. I mean, it's just, these people are stupid. But Kulinski has promoted these theories. And he's promoted, he hasn't outright said it, but he's done videos on it. You can look at his YouTube channel. It's all there. All the evidence is there. Implying that maybe Elon, through Starlink, stole the election by manipulating the machines. Even though Kulinski rightly pointed out in 2020 that these voting machines aren't really connected to the internet. and therefore they can't really be rigged. But he's not principled. Kyle Kulinski isn't principled. He's lost his mind. And now he goes around saying that everyone who supports Trump's a fascist and that Trump's a fascist. It's like, dude, first off, Joe Biden was much closer to being a fascist than Donald Trump, almost objectively. I mean, you can have your opinions on it, obviously, but I'll give you an example. Kulinski said the fact that Trump had suggested he could ignore a court ruling, that's an example of Trump being a fascist. But what he doesn't tell you is that Joe Biden clearly and Joe Biden made it very clear he was going to ignore the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled that Joe Biden couldn't forgive student college debt, and Joe Biden said, "I'm going to do it anyway." Joe Biden literally said, "I don't care what the Supreme Court ruled. I'm going to get rid of college debt anyway." Now, you could support that policy, that's fine, which Kulinski does, but that was Joe Biden clearly going against the Supreme Court ruling, just out in the open, not even pretending. And Kyle Kulinski had no problem with that. He didn't call Joe Biden a fascist, or Biden just clearly ignoring a Supreme Court ruling. He didn't call him a fascist then, but because Trump's pursuing policies Kulinski doesn't agree with, then he's a fascist for suggesting. Trump hasn't ignored a Supreme Court ruling yet. Joe Biden literally did, and he wasn't a fascist then, because Kulinski doesn't really care about whether or not a president's going to follow a Supreme Court ruling. He just cares about the policies, which I can understand, but he only talks about. But the reason why he focuses on Trump perhaps ignoring a court ruling is because, that's going to have the most broadest appeal. The broadest outrage would be a president ignoring a court ruling. So that's what Kulinski focuses on, even though that's not really what he cares about. What he cares about is the policy. Okay? He's trying to trick people, essentially. Okay? He's very sneaky that way. So, he's a bad guy. He's lost his mind. It's a shame. I used to be a fan of his. He used to be like the number one left winger I would listen to when I was in high school and college. Because again, as I said earlier, he was principled. It's so funny, actually, because it used to be he used to be like part of the TYT network that's run by Cenk Uygur. For those who don't know, maybe you've heard of him. The Young Turks, TYT, the Young Turks. They're a massive online news outlet. They're sort of like the OG in terms of alternative media on YouTube, for sure. I don't think they're quite as popular as they once were, but that's probably because there's just much more competition online, in all fairness to them. They used to be like the online news network. Now there's thousands of them. So you can understand why they have a little bit less influence just because there's more competition, in all fairness. But I used to hate Cenk Uygur, the Young Turks. I thought Cenk, he was like this partisan guy. He did push Russiagate hard at times. I think he tends to try to ignore that, but he did. So I used to really dislike him and Anna Kasparian because to me, those were the partisan Democrats during the first Trump term. Kulinski was the more principled guy. And Cenk and Anna Kasparian, the two main hosts of the Young Turks, those were the partisans. But it's now flipped. Cenk and Anna have become way less partisan. They're much more reasonable. Cenk and Anna have made it clear they don't hate MAGA. They don't think everyone who supported Trump's a fascist. They're very clear on it. And Cenk's doing good work right now to try to get MAGA to help Trump. Oh, this is a perfect example. So as I've talked about, I don't want to keep talking about it. I've talked about it so many times the last several episodes. But we are close to going to war with Iran. And there is a big movement in the MAGA world that has influence in Trump to try to convince Trump to pull back from the brink and not allow U.S. to bomb Iran. Okay. Cenk is trying to help those efforts. Cenk is trying to amplify the fact that most of MAGA, does not want Trump to go to war with Iran. And Cenk's trying to work with those people in that MAGA sphere and Anna to help stop Trump from bombing Iran. Kulinski's not doing that. He's just calling MAGA fascists and dummies and saying, well, Trump was never anti-war to begin with, so what do you expect? it's just not, it's not effective to actually stopping the war with Iran. So it just goes to show that Kulinski, he's just a partisan hack, and it's a shame. He used to be principled. He used to not just be a partisan Democrat, but that's what he's become. And he's doing it because it gets him the most views. And I think it's fair to say right after the 2024 election, the left was sort of in a malaise. And Kulinski was one of the top left wingers who was going hardcore against Trump. And you could see he was getting good viewership because of it. So I think part of why he's become such a partisan hack is because it gets him the views, which I can respect and I can understand that. I get it, but he is a hack and it's sort of a shame. Anyway, I think that's it for today. Please subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We'll be back tomorrow with the full podcast. We'll have a new segment at the top, plus the episodes from this past week. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Talk to you later.